Well, to react or respond? Simple question. Simple distinction to make, but rather clear one. React or respond? Well, what does it mean to react? Well, usually we kind of use that in a negative sense, don't we? When we say someone reacted, it's usually a negative term, meaning that they maybe behaved with some type of hostility or opposition or did direct opposite contrary to what they were supposed to do or were asked. To react usually is a quick action. We sometimes will use it in food terms or medical terms. Someone had a reaction to the medication or a reaction to the food, meaning they weren't feeling well or have some type of allergy. To respond is usually something different. It's usually seen more in the positive light. In church, you respond to my invitation to pray. If I say, "The Lord be with you," you respond, "Lift up your hearts. Let us give thanks to the Lord our God." Very positive response. Personally, we respond probably on a daily basis if we meet someone and they smile and extend their hand to shake our hand. Before COVID, now we give them the elbow bump, but we would respond by extending our hand and shaking our hand and responding with a hello. Medically, again, we have response. So often we'll hear that a course of treatment, the patient responded, meaning they're getting better. It's taking its effect. So response is usually a very positive thing, usually something that's somewhat thought out, not quick, not hasty, takes time. Whereas reaction is usually negative, very quick, and sometimes hasty. Simple question. By nature, are you a person that reacts or responds? Usually we have a preferred way of behaving. If you even think the people usually you know that they will immediately react to something, or they may take a little time, step back, and reflect and respond. Do you react or respond? And if you think about the last year, we've seen many reactions and responses. Back last spring, we saw the death of George Floyd and many reactions throughout not only Minnesota, but throughout the entire country and world. Many reactions about racism. And just earlier this month, we celebrated again the holiday for Dr. Martin Luther King, a man who dedicated his life to responding to the question of racism. The recent presidential elections brought many reactions and responses, some very quick reactions, some well thought out responses. Even COVID-19, the news this week in our state about the nursing home report and the number of deaths have brought many reactions, and some who published those reports responding to what they say that they know. Our daily lives, we have many moments where we either are called to react or respond. And simple question, which is our preferred way of operating? If you take all that to the readings, God does not react. God is proactive, not reactive. God is proactive because we know over and over again, we're told that God has a plan. And so we are reminded very clearly of that in all the readings today. The first reading, the book of Deuteronomy, Moses is coming to the end of leading the people. He's giving his farewell speech, really. And what does he remind the people? God is proactive. He has a plan. There will be a new leader to take care of you. Moses reminds the people of God's proactive plan of faithfulness and providence for them. Moses reminds both them and each one of us today, really, that we have our particular calling, if you will, our vocation. The last 3 Sundays now, the last 2 plus this one, the third, we're hearing more and more about vocations and being called, vocalis in Latin, to be called. We heard the call of the apostles the last 2 weeks, and Moses is reminding similarly in between the lines of that vocation, that call, God gives a vocation to each person. And that vocation means God is proactive, following a plan. Second reading picks right up with that. St. Paul's letter to the Corinthians, Paul is encouraging the Corinthians to do what? To respond to their vocation. That's what he's encouraging them to do, not to react in some way, to respond. He gives insight about the duties and responsibilities of marriage, and that a husband and a wife are, he uses the word anxious. I'm not sure that's the best translation into English. It's really more concerned, focused upon. A husband and a wife is more focused upon, concerned with their spouse and to please them, to support them, to love them. So that attention is a bit divided. And we hear about the vocation of single life. Again, the single man, the single woman is a vocation not to be anxious over anything, but anxious, concerned about, focused on serving the needs of the Lord. Some of those temporal concerns they do not need to worry about in marriage and family life. And in between the lines, we also can interpret the vocation of holy orders, the call to priesthood, to religious life. And anyone discerning their call, a young person in particular, thinking about, is the Lord calling me to be single through my life? Is the Lord calling me to marriage? Is the Lord calling me perhaps to priesthood, to religious life? It's a response, it's a reflection, it's a discipline, really, when you think of particularly the call of priesthood, religious life, to lead a disciplined life and a life of the promise of celibacy and the importance thereof. And all too much we have been reminded in the last couple years when those promises are violated, the pain that it causes the entire church community. The priest is really part of God's plan. God's plan right here, right now, proactive, knowing that his salvation continues to unfold in our very midst. And if we look at the gospel, we see once again that Jesus himself is part of the Father's proactive plan. What do we say often? In the fullness of time, the Father sent his Son into the world. It was part of the plan. It was part of salvation history, God's proactive way of life. And if we look at Jesus himself, does he react or does he respond? Well, Jesus always really responds. We don't really see quick, harsh reaction, but rather thoughtful response. In the gospel today, what do we see? First of all, the man with the unclean spirit, he reacts, doesn't he? He says, what? We know who you are. What do you want to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? Kind of a reaction, seeing Jesus. But what does Jesus do? Does he react or respond to the man? He responds. He doesn't react harshly and rebuke him or yell at him, but rather he responds to him in love and in healing. And how about the people gathered around? Do they react or do they respond? Well, I would suggest they respond. What do we hear? They kind of take that step back and say, who is this guy? It's a whole new teaching with authority. They're amazed. They're trying to figure him out, a response of the general person. But we also know in other Gospels we hear of some of the people who reacted, particularly scribes and Pharisees, who every time Jesus acted, they plotted to kill him. Anger, hostility, reaction, not response. So maybe just a few simple questions for us to ponder, not only today, but maybe through the week. Do you generally react or respond in your life? It's a good question. What seems to come more often to us? A quick, harsh reaction or a well thought out, reflective response? Secondly, do we respond with reflection of Jesus' authority in our life? We often don't really like people to have authority in our life, but do we really respond acknowledging Jesus having authority in our life? Third, do you respond to daily life issues by reflecting on Jesus' words or to react by way of human opinion? A reflective response requires a reflection on Jesus and his teaching. That automatic reaction often comes from something else within. And finally, do you see your own vocation, if it's single life, married life, ordained or consecrated life? Do you see your vocation as an open heart response to God or a reaction of a hardened heart of opinion? Sometimes after we begin to live our vocation, we do not remain open to the Lord. That one-time opened heart becomes hardened. And what do we hear over and over in the Scripture? Do not allow your heart to be hardened. We simply reflect on that ability to respond in vocation to God.